Morning, everyone. It's Joe Waxman, and I'm back with another mini reading. Today, I want to look at the chart of famous, renowned martial artist Bruce Lee. Uh, when I was a kid, we were crazy about Bruce Lee. We watched all his movies and, wanted to emulate him, wanted to be like him. Um, just because he's a badass and he's, incredible martial artist. And he was legit. He was the real thing. Like, he really was extremely talented, extremely hardworking, and very intense guy. Like, well, he died young. I mean, that's proof enough that he was committed to his art. So let's get started. Share my screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoy this content, go to my website, macroastrology.com, to book a reading. Okay, Bruce Lee, November 27th, 1940, 7:12 a.m. in San Francisco, California. Okay, so he was a Sag ascendant conjunct the sun, right? So right off the bat, I mean, sun conjunct ascendant, huge personality, huge ego. The sun is in the place of the self, the identity, the most conscious place. This is sunrise, right? Sun rising above the horizon, right? So this is a very leadership oriented position, very egotistical, very powerful, very charismatic, love to be in the limelight. Sagittarius, just people love the sign of Sagittarius. I don't know if you know, like in astrology circles, Sag is one of the most popular signs and one of the most well-liked signs because it's big-minded, it's wild, it's free, it's cool, it's fire, it's like a wildfire. It's just, people love Sag. I mean, it's a great sign. It's, they can't be pinned down. They love their freedom. They love to think big. They got swag, because they're so relaxed and chill, but fiery at the same time. They're just like, hey man, cool man, what's up, man? But very smart, very philosophical. And Sun is ruling the ninth house cusp. This is the house of God, the house of philosophy, the house of higher education, the house of religion, the house of big thinking. It's very Jupiterian. It's the house of original Jupiter, Sagittarius, right? So he's bringing in a lot of philosophical higher-mindedness, and he did develop his own philosophy, his own martial art, his own philosophy. He was a poet and a philosopher, as well as a movie star and a martial artist, right? So that's all present. That's all very prominent with Bruce Lee. Just this huge bright ball of sun right on the ascendant, very philosophical and cool guy, cool personality. Be like water, my friend. Right? It's one of his things. So then we see, like, just look at his chart, this huge red triangle, right? So super prominent. And then these nice blue lines. So his sun had a really nice trine from Pluto to the sun, from the 8th house. This is a very powerful Pluto because it's in Leo, and the Pluto and Leo generation are the boomers, and it's a very strong position for Pluto. It's some people say Pluto is exalted in Leo. In any case, Pluto, the original ruler of Scorpio, or rather the co-rule, not Mars is the original rule. Pluto is the co-ruler of Scorpio. Does very well in Leo, the sign of the ego, the king of the sun. It really amplifies Pluto's power and control. So Pluto in Leo is just, the sign of the developed ego, of the really well-powered, controlling, deep ego. Pluto brings a lot of depth to this kind of, the boomers, you know, they're really strong people. They are. They have this individual power because Pluto's in Leo. Leo rules the development of the ego. So they have this kingly depth to them, this personification of like Pluto as the king, like this psychological power and authority and dominance, very dominant. And because it's aspecting his sun in such a harmonious way, it's just giving him this very incredible presence, this aura, you know, really powerful. Where this right here is just like, wow, such, you know, fierce presence. Made him a movie star. He was in movies before he became a martial arts kind of icon. So this is part of it. Just his presence alone is super powerful. There's also Chiron here. And, you know, Chiron is the wounded healer. Starts out as a rejected by his mother for being a centaur. But then he becomes like this teacher, healer, shaman, and Heracles goes to Chiron because Chiron's a wise man, right? To develop a poison to defeat. Hercules was defeating some enemy and he needed a poison arrow. So Chiron, being like the shaman, this healer, this master, teacher, kind of knew everything, was great at so many things and knew how to create poison. So he created this poison, and Hercules had this poisonous arrow that he was like shooting all over the place, defeating enemies and whatnot. And by accident, he shot Chiron in the leg. And so Chiron becomes wounded, mortally wounded, even though he's immortal. And I think Chiron dies, but the implications as far as the asteroid is that it's a wounded healer, and that initially we're rejected where Chiron sits, and then we become wounded, and then we learn to heal ourselves, and then we become like the shaman healer type, this really wise shaman healer, very evolved. So that's the progress of Chiron. So there's some a lot of empathy, a lot of wisdom, also because it's well aspected to his sun. This gives him this sort of very philosophical healing quality to him as well, like a certain kind of wisdom, teacher, healer. I mean, less of the, you know, when we look at these squares, it'll be more prominent, this kind of, you know, wounded reject thing, but with the trine, it's bringing out the best qualities to his sun. So that's interesting. And Pluto is going to transform Chiron, make it more evolved through pain and hardship anyway. So this is over time becoming a very healing sign, the sign of a healer, teacher, master kind of thing, right? And he was a teacher. He developed his own martial art, Jeet Kune Do, I think. Anyway, let's move on. Super powerful sun, right? Sun does well in Sag anyway because it's a fire sign. Sun rules Leo, exalted in Aries, and does fine, you know, very well in Sag. Moon in Scorpio in the 12th house. Now, Moon in Scorpio is debilitated because it's exalted in Taurus. But it's in the 12th house, and this is double water because 12th house is a water house, Scorpio is a water sign, Moon is a watery planet. So he was very sensitive, very emotional, deep emotions, right? Felt things like tremendously deep. That's the weakness of Scorpio Moon. It's like this deep turbulence of the mind and the emotions, like this. Scorpio has this fierce kind of intensity and depth of feeling that's like the fire goes so deep with Scorpio. Even though it's a water sign, it's like a deep internal burning. Like you can imagine like fire beneath the water. That's Scorpio, right? It's water, but deep inside there's a fire burning, and that's the Mars. That's Mars and Pluto together. co-ruling Scorpio. It's a very intense moon, very vengeful and fighting. Scorpio is a sign that is a fighter. Scorpio is a fighter, right? It's co-ruled by Mars and Pluto together. And both of those are fighters. Mars is more the physical fight. Scorpio is the psychological, deep intensity that transforms you and twists you and molds you through crisis and pain, right? So intense. I'm a Scorpio ascendant, so I mean, maybe you can feel that from me. And I got North Node in Scorpio and Uranus, and 8th house Sun and Venus, and Pluto's also trying my Sun and Venus, so I'm pretty Scorpionic. But psychology and the occult and pain, crisis, transformation, death and rebirth, and fighting the desires, transforming those animalistic desires into something more spiritual. Ultimately, what Scorpio wants is our evolution of the soul, and he's willing to destroy, kill, like death and rebirth, death of the ego, death of the mind, death of those desires to get what it wants. The symbol is the phoenix, dying and burning and rising from its own ashes. The trick is, it's not just rising from its own ashes to be the same old phoenix to burn up again. That's stupid, right? Each time the phoenix rises from its own ashes, it's bigger, better, and more evolved. And that's the purpose of the pain and crisis and transformation of Scorpio. Anything that's in Scorpio is going to have this quality that's just burning, dying through intense pain. And that's why Moon in Scorpio is just so debilitated, because it just messes everything up. Like when you're dying inside, everything else is fucked, because you just can't maintain anything else when you're just going through these ego deaths, these inner emotional. I mean, Moon doesn't represent the ego, it represents the inner mind, the inner being, but it is a part of the ego. It's the internal part of the ego, right? But this is psychic as well, because Scorpio is psychic in his 12th house, and Mercury's here too. So his mind is like deep, dark, psychic, and like, I don't think he was recognized as being psychic, but you can bet he had a sixth sense about himself, and he knew, like, when he was fighting, he reacted from his mind. He reacted from that inner knowing. He could recognize that somebody was about to strike him before they moved, even. Like in that split second, pow, lightning fast. That's where this is coming from. Right here, this ability to see beyond the physical into the spiritual realm. And it's opposite. Anything opposite the moon shows a potential life partner, romantic partner, but also just like in general partnerships. It's almost like moon is can be considered, in Vedic astrology, this is one of the ways to look at the chart. Moon charts. They put moon on the ascendant and they look at everything. So anything opposite the moon shows partnership. And Jupiter conjunct Saturn on the 6th house cusp shows enemies. In general, from the ascendant, but it shows opposition. So here we're seeing how he was such a good fighter. One of the ways, right? Because the psychic moon and Mercury, Mercury's the intellect, right? And we can see psychic ability through the moon and through Mercury, both. And that they're conjunct in the 12th house shows that when he was in opposition to these he attracted very mature, strong opponents, because Jupiter and Saturn together are both very mature, very responsible, very prominent. But even though his moon is debilitated and not strong, he's drawing on this psychic intuition to spiritually defeat his enemies before the battle begins. Like he can sense them on a spiritual level, on a psychic level, preceding any of their physical moves. He's psychologically undermining them, psychologically winning the battle, because Scorpio is psychological and spiritual and psychic. In the moon, it's very psychic to the sun because Pluto rules Scorpio, trining the sun, and it is the eighth house, right? Well, by quadrant, not by sign, by quadrant. And moon is ruling the eighth house in the 12th house, so that's another psychic indication, eighth house ruler moon. And that's good. When eighth house goes into the 12th house, or sixth house, 12th house, eighth house, when these combine their energies, that's good. It means bad things go to bad things and produce good things, something like that. Dark goes to dark and produces, because these are all water houses. So water into water, water, combining, and it's combining its effects. But we see this psychological awareness, this deep psychological perception with Pluto, the sun, eighth house, 12th house, moon, Scorpio, Pluto. That's the battle. It's the psychological battle. It's winning the battle before it begins. But that's not his only strength. That's just the primary thing that he had going for him. Even if he wasn't such a physical master, he had the psychological awareness and perception and depth to defeat his enemies, right? Ascendant Lord Jupiter conjunct Saturn going into the sixth house in Taurus. Sixth house is the house of enemies. It's the house of conflict. It's the house of daily routines and efforts and mundane work. It shows that every day he was out there fighting, practicing, and that's what he did every single day, because sixth house is the house where we just go to work, mundane, daily activity. So his efforts, his ascendant Lord, his identity is going into the sixth house, where he's every day fighting conflict, enemies, competition, daily work, daily practice, working out, training, fighting every single day on a very mature level. Jupiter's philosophical. Saturn is hard work. Saturn in the sixth house means working hard every single day. Saturn does well in the sixth house. Jupiter strengthens Saturn, because Saturn can be a real drag, a real downer. Saturn can make you doubt yourself. Saturn can make you feel like giving up and quitting. But Jupiter is helping Saturn. Jupiter is giving upliftment and exuberance to Saturn. Yes, Saturn is weakening Jupiter, sapping some of its upliftment and its strength, its beneficial qualities, but this is very mature together. They're both very mature planets. They're both leaders. They're both, Jupiter makes the law, Saturn enforces the law. So together they are the law. And the sixth house is very lawyerific house. It's the house where, the law comes together. You can see lawyers often through the sixth house. But, it just shows that he was very disciplined, very hardworking, very mature, and just, he was about the conflict. He was about defeating enemies. And this is very strong for defeating enemies. Uranus here, while we're here, Uranus shows in the sixth house that needing a lot of variety in the daily life, because Uranus is not content to do the same old thing every single day. It wants to mix it up. Jupiter and Saturn are fine, especially Saturn. Saturn loves the mundane life. Saturn is just routine and ordinary and just, like none of this high-minded nonsense. Let's just get down to basics and work hard and forget all the fancy crap. But Uranus wants to make it original and unique. So this makes it so that, every day he's working hard, but he's mixing it up. He's getting a lot of variety in his daily routine, in his everyday work, and it also shows like a surprise. Like when he fights, he's not going to be predictable. He's going to surprise you. He's going to be shocking, and you cannot guess. If he has an enemy, they will not be able to guess what he's about to do, because he's just going to mix it up, and he's going to be super lightning fast, because that's Uranus. It's just a bolt of lightning, and it's going to be shocking and surprising. And yeah, so his daily routine, his daily life is going to be all over the place. It's going to be mixed up here, there, everywhere. A lot of variety. We're getting a nice trine from Neptune in the 10th house, in the sign of the MC. And this is one of the indications of an artistic career, an acting career, a career that is prominent in the public eye, which he was. He started in movies before his martial arts. He was a kid when he first went into movies. And so we're getting this you know, artistic, creative career in movies. And by the way, I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you see this in a politician or a world leader, like, you know, they are lying to you, because this is a sign of an artist, of an actor, of a dancer, of a creative type. And if it's in a politician's chart, they're lying. They're lying. They're a liar. They make a practice out of deception. They have a career out of deception, and that's what they are for. Like Joe Biden, and you know, J.D. Rockefeller, both have this, and they both make a career out of deception. But for Bruce Lee, being in the movies, that's what we want, right? Elvis had this too. And that's what we wanted from Elvis, right? He was in the movies as well. That's one of the indications of a film star. Also could be a dancer, or, you know, martial artist, very similar. Martial artists have to dance on their feet. And here we're getting that daily routine that's going into the public prominence in film, and that lightning fast movement. Sixth house is another way of looking at health. We can see health from the sixth house. So so we know that his nerves, because Uranus controls the nerves, so his nerves were prominent within his health, within his body. Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter's another indication of his body. So he's lightning fast. I mean, this, in other words, what I'm saying is that Uranus is influencing his body. Uranus is influencing his whole health and body, and making him super duper supercharged, super fast. Taurus is not a fast planet, but or not a planet at all. It's a sign. But he was lightning fast, and that's Uranus. But let's look at this very, very prominent T-square, right? So first of all, we have Mars in Scorpio. So we know Mars is the co-ruler of Scorpio. So Mars is very prominent, very strong. Mars is ruling his fifth house, and 12th house cusp. Fifth house is a house of fame. It's a fame-giving house, along with 7th, 10th, and 1st. And we know his first house is incredibly strong. So his body, his vitality, his self, incredible vitality, health. Yeah, I mean, well, he died at 32, so there was obviously some things that were not so great, and we'll look at that. But as I was saying, fifth house. Fifth house is drama. Fifth house is creativity. Fifth house is artistic and games, sports, you know, being on stage, education, gaining notoriety, confidence, and in Aries, so that's very competitive sports, right? So Mars and Scorpio, extremely strong. This is a fame-giving planet because it's ruling the house. So it's in the 11th house. So like wealth is also indicated here, money, because 11th house is career success, hopes, wishes, dreams, groups, networks, but career success. So you can also see, like, how did he make money? Well, that would be second house and 11th house. So Venus is in the 11th house, even though it's in Scorpio, it's in the 11th house. So 11th Lord in the 11th house. So Venus and conjunct a very strong Mars. So he gained wealth through fighting, through conflict, through sports, right? And through drama. So acting, sports, conflict, those type of things. And it's opposite Jupiter and Saturn in the sixth. So this is tying in all those things: film, sport, martial arts, fighting, conflict, right? And it's Mars rules Scorpio, so Mars is very strong here. It's conjunct Venus, so Venus brings in the beauty and the artistic quality. Mars conjunct Venus is very passionate. We see this a lot of times wherever anyone needs like a lot of passion. So arts, music, creativity, right? And even though he was into fighting, it was a martial art, right? We don't call it a martial science, call it a martial art because there's an artistry to it. There's a beauty, there's a grace, there's an art. And if it wasn't artistic, it would not be on film. It would not be made popular the way it was because there would be no draw, there would be no appeal, there would be no beauty to it. But there it is. It's a martial art. There's an artistry to it. It's deadly and beautiful. And it involves a kind of spiritual quality, right? And this is influencing the 12th house, the house of creativity, right? The house of artistry and creativity and spirituality, right? It's 11th and 12th. It's moving into both. You know, Mars is more going into the 12th house. Venus is still kind of in the 11th house, but still has some 12th house influence. And you do have to look at, I believe, the way I see it, multiple houses, the way it's influencing multiple houses, because everything, life is shades of gray. It's you know, we don't have clear delineations between night and day. It slowly gets dark, and we can say like, oh, day ends in here at this hour, and night begins. But if we're not like compartmentalizing and we're just living, we see shades, we see gradations. We don't see these hard lines in life. There are some hard lines, but a lot of times it's grades and shades, right? So this is 11th house, 12th house influence in Scorpio. It's the intensity, right? And Mars here has a really tight square to Pluto, and then somewhat of a less tight square and opposition to Jupiter and Saturn. So this is making him incredibly hardworking and competitive. The drive in Bruce Lee is so fierce with this powerful Mars in Scorpio, square to this Pluto in Leo. I mean, talk about intensity, right? The guy was super strong. I mean, he had like zero body fat, all muscle, fierce as can be, had the most powerful 1-inch punch that we know of. I mean, maybe there are, I don't doubt there are other masters out there, you know, like, but they did not have the notoriety that Bruce Lee had. And he was a master in his own way. I mean, I'm not trying to compare him to anyone else. And, you know, like, you know, people say, well, there are people who are definitely far superior to Bruce Lee. Probably. I mean, there always are, but that's not the point that we're, you know, trying to make here. Point is, incredible competitive drive with this T-square here, right? He was so competitive, and he wasn't just a film star. He won competitions in real life fighting. Like, he was a real life martial arts competitor, and he won championships. He won, you know, all sorts of things. And we can see it. Like, he was legit. He was not a faker. He was not, you know, just a showman, you know, just in the movies, just for show. I mean, this is incredibly intense, and it makes you work hard as hell, squares. The more intense the square, the tighter the square, the more hard it makes you work. And especially with planets like Saturn and Pluto and Mars, you know, in these signs. Jupiter here made it so that he wasn't mean and cruel. Like, he was uplifted, right? He was incredibly hardworking, but he always had this philosophical side to him that even though he's going to work his butt off trained to like nonstop, just nonstop training and fighting and perfecting his arts. And he trained in all different kinds of martial arts, including street fighting and boxing and like you know, Ip Man. I don't even know. I'm not a martial artist, but he invented his own martial arts. Like there's the philosophy, right? Jupiter, ninth house, Jupiter, Saturn, sixth house, right? Is incredibly competitive, is what I'm saying, and it made him work his butt off. And if you have squares, we need squares to make us work hard. And here the Chiron to Venus describes somewhat of the nature of his relationships, as does Moon opposite Jupiter and Saturn. He had difficulty in difficult romantic relationships. You know, it wasn't easy for him. He did marry, and he did. His wife was a foreigner to him because seventh house Lord Mercury is in the 12th house, so that indicates a foreign relationship. He married a white woman, but his relationships were not easy. Venus square Chiron, Moon opposite Jupiter and Saturn. Moon opposite Jupiter is good, but the Saturn makes it difficult. So, you know, mediocre relationships, I'd say, some painful qualities, issues. But you know, because Chiron is difficult, even though at the end of the day, it is a very, can be a very high level healing planet, you know, shows people who are healers. And I'm sure he had healing potential. He could be a healer too, if he wanted, you know, type of person to like break your arm and then heal it afterwards. Sort of like in Redbeard, in Kurosawa's film Redbeard, the doctor who could, you know, break your arm and then heal it afterwards. Anyway, that's a side note. I should look at Toshiro Mifune's and Kurosawa's astrology chart. So this is, in other words, this is where Bruce Lee really got his strength. If you got strong squares and oppositions, it's going to make you work harder. It's going to make you fight. He had South Node in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars. So here again, South Node is where we focus the first half of our life. And he was only 32 when he died. So he was all Aries in what we know of Bruce Lee. And Aries ruled by Mars. Aries is the god of war, right? So if you have South Node in Aries, you are a fighter, regardless of anything else. So he was incredibly supercharged as far as like competition and fighting, and Mars and Scorpio. I mean, that's fierce. That's deadly combination. I mean, this is the mark of a fighter. This is the chart of somebody who is as fierce as can be. If he had lived past age 42, we would have seen a much different side of Bruce Lee. He would have gone more into being famous in film, directing, more behind the scenes, much softer, more balanced Bruce Lee. We did not see that side of Bruce Lee. We did not see the mature Bruce Lee where he's becoming more relaxed, more mature, not such an intense badass that's just like out to, you know, destroy everyone, you know, in the films and in real life. But he would have become much more philosophical, much softer, much more fair-minded, and probably, you know, became famous through directing films and teaching martial arts, but less so on a personal level of like fighting himself. Yeah. But this square, this T square, I think is what killed him in the end. This Pluto square Mars, because this is not, you know, this is not a sign, this is not a combination that wants to let up. This is a combination that just is just sheer drive, sheer unmitigated drive and force. And it just drove him to beyond balance. You know, in my early upbringing, because I was brought up macrobiotically and I was brought into like this Eastern philosophy. That's one of the ways that my underpinnings, where I get my own understanding. Yin and Yang. This is incredibly yin. This is incredibly yang. Like and he drove himself beyond yang to dangerous levels, and that's why he died young. Far too contracted, far too physically dominated, pushing himself far too hard, and that's what this will do. And that's why, if he could have seen a teacher who was really a master of philosophy, a master of understanding these things, they would have really pushed him to relax, pushed him to soften up, pushed him to drop his guard and be more gentle and like, look, if you keep going, you're going to die. It's very clear. It's obvious. Like, he just went beyond the beyond. Beyond the beyond. That's Bruce Lee. Developed the most severe 1-inch punch. That's beyond me, far beyond most people in the world. But killed him. One more thing to add to this. He was and this is my other training. This is my early astrological training. 9 key. We can't see it here. There we go. Japanese. This is Japanese astrology. He was a 6-5-6. That's metal, soil, metal. That means incredibly, which 6 is the sign of the father, and it's yang metal. So it's like incredibly strong-willed, independent, dominant. So it just furthers this whole theme of hard work, maturity, like this unbreakable spirit. And 5 is 5 soil, so it's the mind and the heart. So like independent and uncontrollable, and the controller, and destructive and creative at the same time. And I'll just read you some of the things that it says about 6-5-6, just very briefly. Strong-willed, proud, faithful, magnanimous, stubborn, haughty, egoistic, unadaptable. So the reason I'm saying this is it's just adding to the whole theme, where just Bruce Lee was just this monster of fierce strength and fighting spirit that was just indomitable. And he drove himself to the edge. And what he really needed was this balance, Libra, which he did not get to. That would have happened if he had lived long enough. And he would have learned balance, because Aries is not the sign of balance. Aries is the sign of the hunter, of the devoted, single-minded fighter. Zero fear, zero doubt, just focus, 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 focus. And Libra is the opposite. Libra is the sign of balance and harmony and peace. So it's a shame that he died too young. I really would have liked to have seen, as I'm sure a lot of people would, the more mature Bruce Lee that really became a master of life, not just the martial arts, not just of defeating the enemy in physical combat. Yeah, amazing guy. I just have ultimate respect for Bruce Lee. You can probably tell. It makes me very passionate just talking about him. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. And if you want a reading, go to my website, macroastrology.com. That's it for today. I will be back tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.